The re-election of Donald Trump has become a significant source of concern for the European Union, arguably more so than for any other US ally. As one of the largest trading partners of the United States, the EU is already experiencing rising tensions with its transatlantic counterpart following a series of energy crises sparked by Ukraine's halt to Russian energy transit, Qatar's cessation of gas exports to Europe, and Azerbaijan's suspension of supplies due to unexplained technical issues. The EU is grappling with an increasingly precarious energy situation. These challenges were compounded by a fresh round of US sanctions on Russian oil and gas, causing a surge in global energy prices. The repercussions have been severe for the EU, with gas prices skyrocketing, public dissatisfaction with the European Commission mounting, and inflation continuing to weigh heavily on economies across the continent. Adding to the strain, Trump has announced plans to impose new tariffs on European goods, further jeopardizing the already fragile EU-US relationship. Such measures are poised to have lasting impacts on the EU economy, compounding existing challenges and threatening the region's economic stability. In response, the EU is taking decisive steps to mitigate the potential fallout, recognizing the need to reduce its reliance on US trade and demonstrate its economic resilience. The bloc has accelerated efforts to diversify its trade partnerships globally. A key element of this strategy is the recently concluded free trade agreement with Mexico, a US neighbor. This deal not only strengthens the EU's position in North America, but also serves as a signal of its ability to forge significant alliances outside the US sphere. Additionally, the EU has secured a landmark free trade agreement with South American countries, cementing its commitment to expanding its global trade network ahead of Trump's inauguration. Through these moves, the EU aims to shield itself from potential US economic pressures while asserting its role as a major player in global trade. These alliances are more than economic. They are geopolitical statements of the EU's intention to navigate and counteract the challenges posed by a second Trump presidency. In this video, we explore the EU's retaliatory measures and their potential impact on the relationship between the United States and the European Union. The European Union and Mexico have finalized a modernized trade agreement, marking a significant enhancement of their economic partnership. This updated accord, concluded on January 17, 2025, aims to reduce both parties' economic dependence on the United States, especially in light of anticipated US tariff increases under President-elect Donald Trump. Key features of the EU-Mexico trade agreement include tariff elimination, with the agreement removing high tariffs on various EU exports to Mexico, including agricultural products such as cheese, poultry, pork, pasta, apples, jams, chocolate, and wine. This is expected to boost EU agri-food exports significantly. Market access will be improved for EU companies, granting them better access to Mexican government contracts, investments, and service sectors, including financial services and telecommunications. This ensures that EU firms receive treatment on par with Mexico's other preferential trade partners, such as the US and South Korea. The agreement includes enforceable commitments on labor rights and environmental protections, reflecting both parties' dedication to sustainable development. The deal also aims to strengthen the supply chain of critical raw materials, ensuring a sustainable and secure supply essential for various industries. This modernized agreement updates the original EU-Mexico Global Agreement, which has been in force since 2000. The new accord is designed to reflect the evolving economic landscape and deepen the strategic partnership between the EU and Mexico. The agreement must now undergo ratification by both EU and Mexican lawmakers before it can enter into force. This process is expected to face scrutiny from various stakeholders, including European farmers, concerned about increased competition. The European Union and the Mercosur bloc, comprising Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, have finalized a comprehensive trade agreement after 25 years of negotiations. This accord aims to establish one of the world's largest free trade zones, encompassing over 700 million people and nearly 25% of global GDP. Key provisions of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement include tariff reductions, with the agreement planning to eliminate tariffs on over 90% of goods traded between the EU and Mercosur nations, potentially saving EU companies approximately €4 billion annually in export duties. Market access for EU industries, including automobiles and chemicals, will be improved, while South American agricultural products, such as beef and poultry, will have increased entry into the EU. Both parties have agreed to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement and implement measures to prevent deforestation by 2030. The deal includes dispute settlement mechanisms to enforce these commitments. Despite the potential economic benefits, the agreement faces opposition within the EU, particularly from farmers and environmental groups. Critics argue that the influx of South American agricultural products could undercut European farmers and raise concerns about environmental standards. French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed strong reservations, seeking additional safeguards and sustainable commitments. For the agreement to come into effect, it requires ratification by all 27 EU member states and approval from the European Parliament. Given the existing opposition, particularly from countries with significant agricultural sectors, the ratification process may encounter challenges and could extend over several years. Now, let's discuss the EU-US relationship over the years. Earlier, engagements and formalization. The US's engagement with Europe post-World War II laid the groundwork for its relationship with what would later become the European Union, EU. The Marshall Plan in 1948 was pivotal in rebuilding Europe, providing financial aid to war-torn nations to stabilize their economies and promote regional cooperation. The US also supported the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, in 1951, viewing it as a mechanism to prevent future conflicts between France and Germany by integrating key industries. In 1954, the EU's precursor established its delegation in Washington, D.C., to manage growing economic ties. This relationship deepened with the establishment of the United States Mission to the European Communities in Brussels in 1961, symbolizing a mutual commitment to fostering political and economic cooperation. Formation of security alliances. COINS. The immediate aftermath of World War II, the United States emerged as a global leader, actively shaping the post-war international order. Recognizing the growing threat posed by the Soviet Union, the US took decisive steps to contain Soviet expansion and promote democratic values. In response to the Soviet Union's increasing influence in Eastern Europe, and actions such as the Berlin Blockade, the United States spearheaded the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in 1949. This collective defense pact included the US, Canada, and several Western European nations, committing each member to mutual defense in the event of an attack. The US played a pivotal role not only as a financial benefactor, but also as a military ally, stationing troops in Europe and appointing General Dwight D. Eisenhower as NATO's first Supreme Commander. President Harry S. Truman introduced the Truman Doctrine in 1947, marking a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy. This doctrine declared that the U.S. would support free peoples resisting subjugation by armed minorities or external pressures, specifically targeting the spread of communism. Initially, it provided substantial economic and military aid to Greece and Turkey to prevent them from falling under Soviet influence. This policy laid the foundation for the US's strategy of containment throughout the Cold War. Complementing these efforts, the US launched the Marshall Plan in 1948, a massive economic aid program aimed at rebuilding war-torn Europe by revitalizing European economies. The plan sought to create stable conditions where democratic institutions could thrive, thereby reducing the appeal of communist ideologies. The success of the Marshall Plan further solidified Europe's alignment with American policies during the early Cold War period. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 significantly strengthened military cooperation between the United States and its European allies within the framework of NATO. The conflict underscored the perceived threat of communist expansion, prompting NATO to establish the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE, in 1951, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower appointed as the first Supreme Allied Commander. This development marked a pivotal step in NATO's evolution from a political alliance to a comprehensive military organization. However, the Suez Crisis of 1956 exposed underlying tensions within the alliance. When Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal, the United Kingdom and France, in conjunction with Israel, launched a military intervention to regain control. The United States, under President Eisenhower, opposed this action, fearing it would destabilize the region and push Arab nations toward the Soviet sphere of influence. Consequently, the US exerted diplomatic and economic pressure on its European allies to withdraw, highlighting divergent interests and signaling a shift toward more independent European foreign policy. The Berlin Crisis of 1961 was a pivotal moment in the Cold War, significantly impacting European Union and United States relations. The crisis began in June 1961, when Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev met with US President John F. Kennedy and demanded the withdrawal of Allied forces from West Berlin, threatening to sign a separate peace treaty with East Germany that would end existing four-power agreements guaranteeing American, British, and French access rights to West Berlin. In response, the United States reaffirmed its commitment to West Berlin. President Kennedy requested an increase in the Army's total authorized strength and ordered that draft calls be doubled, demonstrating a firm stance against Soviet pressure. The crisis underscored the importance of NATO as a stabilizing force in Europe. The alliance's collective defense principle provided a framework for coordinated military and political responses to Soviet actions, reinforcing Western unity during the standoff. Throughout the crisis, the United States continued to support European integration, viewing a united and economically strong Europe as a bulwark against communist expansion. This support was evident in US backing of initiatives like the European Economic Community, fostering closer economic and political ties among Western European nations. During the 1960s and 1970s, Europe increasingly sought to assert its independence in foreign and economic policies, often diverging from US positions. The Vietnam War, from 1955 to 1975, became a significant point of contention between the United States and its European allies. While the US escalated its military involvement in Southeast Asia, many European nations were reluctant to offer support. Notably, France vocally opposed the US intervention, reflecting its own colonial history in Indochina and a desire to distance itself from American foreign policy decisions. In contrast, the United Kingdom and West Germany exhibited varying degrees of public support, yet refrained from committing troops, highlighting a complex spectrum of European responses to the conflict. Economic tensions also emerged during this period, particularly concerning monetary policies. The collapse of the Bretton Woods system in the early 1970s led to significant exchange rate volatility, adversely affecting European economies. In response, European leaders sought to reduce their dependence on the US dollar and enhance monetary stability within the continent. This culminated in the establishment of the European Monetary System, EMS, in March 1979, initiated under the leadership of then-President of the European Commission, Roy Jenkins. The EMS aimed to foster closer monetary policy cooperation among European Economic Community member states by linking their currencies to prevent large fluctuations in relative value. Key components included the European Currency Unit, ECU, a basket of member currencies, and the Exchange Rate Mechanism, ERM, which set exchange rate margins and required interventions when deviations exceeded agreed-upon limits. During the Reagan administration, Europe focused on economic liberalization and free market policies, aligning with Europe's push for a single market under the Single European Act in 1986. Despite this alignment, trade disputes emerged, particularly over agricultural subsidies. Under the Common Agricultural Policy, the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a pivotal shift in global dynamics, prompting the European Union and the United States to realign their relationship towards economic collaboration and peacekeeping efforts. This transition was formalized through key agreements that expanded the scope of transatlantic cooperation. In November 1990, the Transatlantic Declaration was adopted, establishing a structured framework for political dialogue between the European Community and the United States. This declaration underscored shared values such as democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, setting the stage for regular consultations on economic and political matters. Building upon the foundation laid by the Transatlantic Declaration, the new Transatlantic Agenda, NTA, was launched in December 1995 during the EU-US Summit in Madrid. The NTA outlined 4 broad objectives for collaboration, promoting peace and stability, democracy, and development around the world, responding to global challenges, including environmental degradation, terrorism, and health issues, contributing to the expansion of world trade,